Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in once again to, I believe this is our eighth, but correct me if I'm wrong, eighth installment in this Grants 101 webinar series for Georgia's local officials. I apologize in advance for any background noise. I'm coming to you all live from Canton, Georgia, where I'm here doing a training. So I still wanted to jump on and just formally introduce Amanda and Kimberly and welcome you all to this afternoon's webinar. Before I hand it off to them, just want to cover a couple of just usual housekeeping notes. If you're new here, before we begin today's event, just a reminder that you all are participating in listen only mode, but we do encourage you to continue using the chat as well as the Q&A function in Zoom. If you would like to submit a question for either Amanda or Kimberly, there should be a Q&A button at the right next to your chat button, at least on my screen it is on your Zoom window. Materials from today's webinar, as well as all the past 7 webinars, I'll include a link to that in the chat. It's our Grants 101 archives on GMA's website. And if you're coming from a regional commission, the same materials are also being posted to the Georgia Association of Regional Commissions website as well. As a registrant of this webinar, you will also receive a follow-up email with the materials and information. So I know Amanda and Kimberly have another exciting and informative session prepared for you all today. So without further ado, I want to turn it over to Amanda Day and Kimberly Hayes DeMuga of Heyday Services. I neglected to introduce myself as I usually do, but I'm Claire Chan with GMA, and I'll be available via email and in the chat if anyone does have any questions. So now, without further ado, take it away, Amanda and Kimberly. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire's working hard today, y'all. She's wearing many hats. So just to reiterate, yes, recordings will be available via email if you registered and in the other areas that Claire defined. So we got you. Also, this time of year, I know it's tricky. I know there's a lot going on. So we're just excited that you could join us today to talk about the not very merry thing in this holiday season, which is 5 reasons grants are declined. So we'll be dividing this up and giving some examples, but it's sort of like a learning from our mistakes or mistakes others have made, or also learning more about how that grant making sausage is made to help you understand why something may or may not be a good fit, and also maybe why grants are declined, even if you have a fantastic program, checked all the boxes, and uploaded all the attachments. So while I wouldn't say that this is perhaps our most uplifting topic, I think it's a very important one. And learning why things are the way they are is a great way to educate yourself and educate up to your supervisors, bosses, mayors, board chairs, chiefs, whoever it may be, to help them understand too, because unfortunately, it's not a straightforward process usually in grant seeking. So we're hoping to give you some information about that. And as we always do, if you're joining us for the first time, we have some more intro slides about ourselves and some house rules. I think Amanda has something to say.
I do. I was going to say real quick too, like Kimberly said, we'll be sharing some stories. I have some I'll be telling on myself a few times as we're going through these. I just want to let everybody know that this really is a safe space. Nobody is perfect, and we've all made mistakes. And so for the longest time, I never shared like, oh my gosh, I did this thing and it was horrible, because I was so embarrassed. And I thought, if other grant writers know, they're going to kick me out of the club. But the reality is we've all had some shenanigans. And once people started sharing their stories with me, it just made me feel so much better. Like, oh my gosh, okay, I'm not the only one who has missed deadlines, who has done other things. So feel free, if you've got a story of your own to share, this really is a safe space to come in and be like, yep, I've done that myself. So feel free to unburden if it makes you feel better. Or if you don't want to share, that's fine too.
Or if you're thinking, wait a minute, but it's being recorded, then you might just want to tell your story about a friend that you know.
Yeah, I know a friend.
This friend experienced this thing, they did this thing, this friend, won't you help me, but with my friend. So here we are. We have been training for a long time. We've got 50+ years of grant writing, fundraising experience. We've been podcasting since 2018. And then from that grew our love of training and sharing our experiences with folks about helping them build capacity to get more grants and to raise more money to do more good things. And we also held some leadership positions in and around the Grant Professionals Association. And we're just happy to share. I always learn something with everything I teach, and I know Amanda does too. So we'll just cruise on through to the house rules. As Claire so ably mentioned earlier, I know we have a slightly smaller group today. Well, it looks like there are 31 people on the calls, but if you would still, if you have like a question, as opposed to a comment or, oh, that happened to me too, or blah, blah, blah. That's great for the chat. If you have a question about anything that we're talking about today, please use the Q&A, which lives right next door to your chat. So you'll be getting a recording, and we talked about the slides, and Claire is gonna hop off and do other cool things for y'all as a part of your membership in GMA. So I think that's it, Amanda, for house rules, unless there's anything else. And we'll just get on to the good news, bad news game. I'm not going to ask you what you want first. We're just going to go to the bad news and why your grants might get declined. Sometimes it is something that you did, like missed a deadline or misunderstood a deadline, or hi, hello, it's not a friend that did this, it was me. Thought the deadline was at 5 and it was at noon. So there are some times where there's just a miscommunication or life erupts around you and you're not going to get that grant because you didn't make the deadline, or you're not going to get that grant because you uploaded the wrong attachment. So sometimes that's sort of on the grant writer or the person who is being voluntold to be the grant writer. So the next slide, when I was writing these slides, I'm like, okay, there's good news and bad news, and we'll do the bad news first. The good news is that it's not always your fault. That still means you may not be getting the grant. I would call this the mixed news if I wanted to be straight up about it. It really isn't always your fault, particularly if you're like, well, I wrote it well. I answered every single question in the order. I know that we're a good fit because I reviewed the grant instruction guide that's sometimes called a RFP or a NOFA or an OFA. I did all the things. I had my letters of support. Why didn't I get the grant? There are a lot of ways that grant making decisions are made. And even in more transparent situations, such as with state and federal funding, where they do give you in the grant instructions like a rubric of, you know, what points are assigned and how it's going to be reviewed, there's still a lot of things at play. And it gets even trickier when you're looking at funding from private foundations or corporate foundations. And I know for a lot of you, that's not something that you're actively pursuing, but you may be working with nonprofits in your municipalities that are looking at private funding sources. And it's not as transparent as government funding. So there could be things going on. Someone coming with a bigger scope of work in their grant proposal, someone coming from an area that this state or federal agency, geographic area that is a huge priority for them. So they have a limited amount of money and they're sort of triaging and going there. So it's, I'm hoping too that if other people who are not grant writers, but supervised grant writers are able to see this, you can do all the right things and still not get the grant. So maybe good news is not the title for the slide that I thought it would be, but there is hope. So there was bad news, there was quasi good news, but the best news is that going through sort of these examples and case studies and sort of pulling that curtain to talk more about what goes on behind the scenes, that kind of preparation and education will help you put forth stronger applications and perhaps also help you develop even more discernment about what you should go for and what may not be the best fit. So I'll be going into more details about that, but I would just say it's important. I just think it's important. It was important to my growth as a grant professional to understand this. and to also educate those around me, because people may have the idea, oh, well, you're just going to fill out that form and upload a couple of letters and we're all good. We're all good. There's a lot more to it than that. And as much as I don't like to emphasize how competitive it can be, there's a lot of BIL money out there right now. And there's a lot of people that know that there's a lot of money out there. And there are a lot of people trying for that money. And that's just one example. So understanding how it works and how you can be best prepared to put your best grant foot forward is just going to go a long way. So we're just again going through some scenarios, and we came up with 5 and kind of categorize them as sort of technical things, which Amanda's going to go over, and then some more of that behind the scenes, how the sausage is made in grant making decisions. And thought we would divide it up into these 2 parts and talk you through it. There are many more than 5 reasons, but from our experience, we felt like these were the 5 primary reasons. Amanda, does that are we good with
Yeah.
that? All right.
That's fair. So, yeah, so as Kimberly said, kind of divided up in kind of 2 chunks. And the first one is more of out on a technicality. And you can look at this as a standpoint of, this is probably a mistake that me or my team or our organization has made, that for that reason we're out. So these are the ones you have control over. So if I'm going to not get a grant award, I never want it to be because I've made a mistake. And so these are the ones that I'm really trying to pay attention to as I'm going through and doing things. But as I told you, I'm going to have some stories to share. So this is one we've mentioned a few times, missing a deadline. Every funder is going to set a deadline. And I say every funder. There certainly are some private funders that have no deadlines. They just take them and review as they go. So there certainly are some exceptions to that rule. But for most of you on the call today, I'm assuming you're probably going for federal and state, maybe even some smaller county grants. They're pretty much always going to have a deadline, and they're very specific about it. They're, especially the federal ones, they will tell you it's due December 1st at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time zone, and they're not kidding. And so you really want to pay attention to that deadline, okay? So we've all missed, I'm going to guess everybody on the call, if you've been doing this long enough, you probably have missed a deadline, or maybe you've made it in by the skin of your teeth a few times. But reasons this happens, one is just time management. You know, even if you maybe know, okay, I've got 30 days to do this, but especially if you're someone who grants is just a small part of everything else you do, it can be really hard to, even in 30 days, get a federal grant proposal all put together with all the pieces and all the things. So just trying to figure out all the things you have to do, because it's not just the writing, it's the gathering of signatures. It is, you might need support letters, you might need other documents, and some things may take longer. One of the things as far as time management went that I always struggled with, a lot of grant applications may require a resolution passed by your board. Okay. Well, how often does your council meet, and how far in advance do you need to have an agenda item ready to even get on that meeting? So sometimes I'd start looking at, well, heck, this is due in 4 weeks. I've already missed the cutoff for the next council meeting. The next one's only 3 days, but okay, I've got to get on that one, and I've got to have all my ducks in a row to get that done, right? So time management is definitely a big one. I will also say time management when it comes to getting your submittal. These days, most of our submittals are online. We're just going and pushing that button. But I will tell you, the day of a grant deadline, that is when things are going to go wrong, that are usually out of your control. That's when the power goes out. That's when the portal's having issues. That's when everybody else is on there. That's when who knows what happens, right? So sometimes you're like, but I got it done in time. But if you can't get that button not only pushed, but everything goes through the magical world that is the internet and makes it through to the other side. If that doesn't happen, you don't get to call your funder and go, I was pushing submit. If you've ever read guidelines from a federal funder, they typically somewhere in there recommend that you submit your grant 72 hours before the deadline, because that gives you time to work out those wrinkles when they happen, right? And so you want to make sure that time management, really, really big deal. Some of it can be a lack of essential information. Again, if you're waiting for necessary information, whether it's info you need so that you can write, or whether there's documents that you're relying on them from somebody else, time management is a big thing there. And so that's one of the things that I think Patrick may be saying the same things, looking at the list of required documents. That's usually one of the very first things I figure out. What do I need? What can I do myself? What do I need to get from other people? And I'm starting on that immediately. And I'll be honest, I rarely tell anybody, hey, this grant's due on December 30th. Usually I say, hey, for a grant I'm working on, I need this from you. Can I get it by December 15th? That way I have wiggle room if they're running a few days late, right? So getting that essential information. And again, just things happen. Okay. I've missed a deadline before because I was traveling for work. And so I wasn't at home with my whiteboard that has my deadlines in front of my face. And for whatever reason, I had in my head that this grant was due on a Thursday night. It was in my head and I thought I had till Thursday. And so Thursday night, after I finish teaching that day, I go and I thought, okay, I can put the finishing touches and hit submit. And as I log in, I realized it was due Wednesday night. So totally my fault, just because I didn't go back and double check. So all kinds of reasons. And you could certainly try and ask for an extension. I can't imagine a funder's going to give it to you, especially now, if there has been a hurricane or a tornado hit our town. Okay, even the feds are probably going to say, you know what, we're going to give you a few extra weeks to get that in. That is such a rare thing though, right? So most of the time it's like, sorry, we advertised, everybody else got it in on time. So that's not the way to go. Instead, you're trying to avoid your grant applications missing the deadline by planning ahead, figuring out all the pieces you need. And again, part of it is educating up and making your organization understand, your boss and your colleagues, like, hey, I can't do this on my own. It requires sometimes information, sometimes documents, whatever from you. And I'm working on deadlines, which means we all have to be working on deadlines. And so as nicely as you can get that across to people, I always did the kill them with kindness, like, oh my gosh, can't thank you enough for helping me with this. Really could use this information from you. And I quickly figured out where I worked. There were people that were really, really good about helping me and getting things in a timely manner. And those are the people I just worked with. And the ones that, either things were late or they never got things to me, I always just figured out a workaround. Like, okay, if I can't get that from this person, who else in this organization can get it for me? Because I need somebody that can be timely, because I just can't be late. So yeah.
I was going to share, Amanda, right quick. There's
Go for it.
in the bajillion years that I've been doing this, the only extension that I ever got was one I actually didn't ask for. I was working in a place where I sent out, it doesn't matter. It was a bunch of grants, it was a grindhouse and it was for a great cause. And I was doing something that I hated, which was turning in the grant the day it was due, the afternoon it was due at 5. And they just had started operating with a brand new portal, and there were lots of bugs in that portal, and it was taking 10 and 20 minutes to upload the final 5 documents, and it was 4:30, and it was 4:40, and it was 4:45, and it was 4:50, and I had 3 more documents to go, and I finally realized I'm going to keep going until 5, but it's not going to happen. So I just let my boss know, whose office was next door, and I was just like, this is on me. This is what has happened. I can't make this deadline. I'm just going to contact this funder on Monday and explain that we're not turning in, because it was someone that I had a working relationship with, a foundation I had a working relationship with. And I just sent an email saying, I'm sorry, on behalf of this organization where I work, I'm not going to be able to turn this in. I was unable to upload the attachments in time. I'll catch you the next cycle or something like that. Good luck in your selection process. Because they were expecting a proposal. Then the program officer emailed me back on Monday and said, well, there were people experiencing a lot of difficulties. I can give you to the end of the day. But it's kind of like I didn't go, can I please? Because I was having trouble because my car had a flat tire and I had to go. Even if that was what happened, it was kind of on me to plan ahead and manage my time to make that deadline.
Yep.
I think that's just maybe an example of how good communication works, but it was kind of like I didn't call her up and go, when your portal is not great, although it wasn't. And it got better next time. So that's the only time that's happened. And I never recommend clients to, especially for state, federal, and places where you don't have, if you just call up and go, oh, we couldn't get it in today because of XYZ, everyone else did. So it's not, you're not in a position of strength for that. So I would just say, let's,
Yeah.
I can't imagine the circumstance, like Amanda said, it would have to be something really, really bad. So let's.
Although a good example, I don't know if anybody on the call, this has been a couple of years ago now, but when all the like the COPS grants through Department of Justice, when they brought out their very new portal, Just Grants,
Oh.
they, I don't know if you applied to anybody on here, did that yet, Patrick, so that they actually pushed the deadline back a couple of weeks because so many people were like, I can't, your portal's got bugs, your portal's got issues. We can't. So enough people, it wasn't just, hey, we were late. It was like everybody.
They're doing it early enough to
Yes.
identify the problem.
Yes. So yeah. So it, again, exceptions to every rule, just like everything in life, but you know, you want to make sure that
Waited to the last day for Just Grants,
yeah,
never would have come forward. So
yeah, using two different portals, and which it drives me crazy that the whole don't get me started. Yeah, one portal, but not two, and but a lot of federal funders do that.
Deep cleansing breaths. We'll just continue on.
Okay. So another one that can happen to you is incomplete attachments or documents. Okay. So really forgetting just one piece of paper, basically one document, one attachment could be what disqualifies your application. And what really stinks about being disqualified is it's not just, hey, they reviewed it and we didn't get it. It's they usually won't even look at your application if it's not considered complete, which means you don't get any feedback, right? Because if you don't know this, a lot of federal funders, if you ask them, they will give you, here's your scores, here's your reviewer comments. So at least if you don't get your application, you can look at that and go, okay, fair enough. We didn't do real well in this section. So now next year we know what to do better. So hopefully we can get awarded in the future, right? But if they don't even look at your application, you have no idea if you did a good job or not for next time. Okay. So you want to make sure you don't forget an application. Ways to do that. A lot of federal funders they supply their own checklist. Usually it's the last page of the RFP where they're going to list every single document that you have to have as part of that application. If they don't give you a checklist, just create your own. This is what I do when I read the guidelines. Every time it says, okay, you have to have this document, you have to have this document, I just start making me a list of what it is. And this really does help going back to figuring out what do you need from other people. That's that list I go from and go, okay, so I have to have a resolution. So let's get on that agenda. I have to have a map. Let me go talk to somebody from GIS who can build a map for me. I have to have this. So that checklist really can help you with a lot of things. Okay. And also a big thing is it can make sure that you don't forget anything as you are uploading documents into the portal. Because more and more portals are good about, like, you can try to hit submit and you'll get an error saying, hey, you forgot, you didn't attach the budget. Great, that's handy. But not every portal has that handy feature. Okay. Even grants.gov, which is pretty good about giving you error messages. So with the workspace in grants.gov, basically you've got, here's the box with all the required attachments, and you work on them, and then when they're done, you move them over to the other box, right? But sometimes there'll be attachments that you have to create and upload on your own. And so grants.gov can't check for those. It can only check, did you do the ones we gave you? It doesn't seem to know how to check for those extra ones that the funder may require, if that makes sense. So don't rely on, well, the portal said I had everything in there. You definitely want to go back and check that. And again, portal requirements, again, they're inconsistent. Also, you want to pay attention to your files that you're uploading. Sometimes they're very specific about, you have to name it. It has to be the name of your city and a period, and then the name of the form, and then a period, and then a description of this. And so they can be very, very specific. Sometimes it has to be the first 3 letters of your city and a dash, and then the first 3 letters. So just make sure that you're naming them the way the funder wants you to name them. Also that you're using the right types of files. Sometimes they will only take PDFs. Sometimes they may take Word or Excel. Also, sometimes they limit you on the size of the file that you can upload. And so if it's too big, you're going to have to figure out how to shrink it. And those are some things that, like, first time I had to do it, I probably had to call IT and go, help, this file is too big, but I need to submit this document. How do I make it smaller? I can do it now because somebody taught me how. So the random things you learn as a grant person of how to do that has nothing to do with grant writing, but it's all that other stuff you've got to keep up with. And one other thing I will say about uploads is they usually, not always, but a lot of times they will have a, hey, if you've got anything extra you want to share with us, you can attach up to so many files here. If they give you that option, attach something, okay? Anything that can help them understand better about who you are. If you guys do some sort of annual report or review, it's a nice thing to have them over you. If you have brochures about the program you're trying to get funded, if you have before and after pictures, of what, maybe you're doing a new park. And so you can show how rundown, and it's got that metal slide that burns every kids and the teeter-totters that are like the spinning wheel of death. And here's the rendering of the new, much safer and much bigger park we're planning. So they have that before and after. If they don't ask for that anywhere else in the document, but there's an extra attachment, include those, okay? Usually they don't get you bonus points per se, but it gives the reviewer just more information about who you are and what you're trying to do, which is always going to make it just a much better review process. So, yeah. Kimberly says if they're optional, treat them as mandatory. Put something there. Absolutely. Oops.
Share the story.
And one I will say real quick, the probably the worst horror story I've ever seen. It was an article I read by a grant writer I knew. Her grant application was not reviewed. It was disqualified because she forgot to upload the abstract. You know how a lot of federal grants will want an abstract. It's like an overview, a quick summary of everything. It wasn't worth any points. It was only like 4 sentences long. But because she didn't have that one document, they deemed it incomplete. And it was this huge, like multi-million-dollar, a lot of community colleges had come together for this big regional project. And she's like, we spent probably 6 months planning for this grant and didn't even get it reviewed because we forgot. She's like, I wrote it, I just forgot to attach it. So pay attention. So, okay. So the last one in these are the technical things that, we have some control over. It's just that it's not a good fit. You're trying to put a square peg in a round hole, right? And oftentimes this happens not because you as the grant writer are going, hey, let's just go for this grant because I got nothing better to do today. It's usually, a city manager, a council member, a mayor, somebody in the community who has some pull that's like, hey, I heard about this grant and you need to go for it. And so suddenly you're stuck writing a grant that you all may not even be eligible for. Okay. And chances are, if you don't meet these requirements, then you're probably not going to get funded. Okay. So things that maybe at the surface to someone who doesn't know better, who doesn't read all the fine print, they think, oh, this is perfect. Y'all could go for this. But when you start really looking into the fine print, right? Like the geography, they really want to fund, something in the north. Well, Georgia, we're not the north, so that's not going to happen, right? Maybe it's the eligible costs. Like part of our program is the main thing we really need is a bus, but they don't pay for any transportation costs. So it's like, well, great, we could get, $10,000 worth of stuff, but that's not very helpful to us if we don't have a bus to get people from point A to point B. Maybe we're not eligible. Maybe there's certain partnerships that are supposed to be in place. So there could be a lot of things. So if the funder spells something out in their guidelines on their website, they're not kidding about it, so you want to make sure that you really are ticking all of the boxes, and really pay attention to things like unallowable costs or focus or proposal. So it's just, there may be just that one thing that keeps you out. Or there could be a lot of things that keep you out. So you really want to pay attention when you're reading these things, like, are we truly eligible? Because it may say, yes, cities can apply, but then when you read a few other things, it's like, yes, but it's got to be, it has to be cities that have less than 5,000 in population. Well, hello, City of Atlanta, you're not applying for that grant, but somebody may be telling, oh no, they'll love us, they'll give it to us anyway. No, probably not. So pay attention to all of the details and making sure that you really, truly are eligible, because if you're not, there's no point in applying. No.
True story.
Yes, yes, yes. Okay.
So part two, we're moving more into behind the scenes kinds of things that may have more to do with context, decision making on the part of the grant reviewers and the funding agency, and those kinds of things. And versus like the first part said, getting knocked out on a technicality, because that's a heartbreaker about the abstract. And you can just see how easily it could happen.
Yeah.
So when we're thinking about mixed messages, Amanda just touched on this in a slightly different way with reason 3. So if we're looking at reason 4, which is coming up on the next slide, it really bears repeating that there's a big difference between being eligible to apply and competitive. So Amanda was really holding up the, sure, you can apply or you can try and apply, but they're looking for smaller municipalities or municipalities in the Southwest and we're in the Southeast or something like that. That's kind of is a technicality, but what if it was something where any municipality could apply, regardless of geographic location or size? Then you're eligible, and that could be very exciting. And particularly when people who don't write a lot of grants, they may be the ones forwarding all these opportunities to you, and you're looking at them, and it's like, okay, in our city X, we could apply, but what they're asking for in this particular RFP or NOFO or OFA, as they're all commonly exchanged acronyms around an instructional guide, maybe they're looking for more of a regional scope, or maybe they're really, as you read this 30 to 100-page document, right? It gives you all the information you need to know. You begin to see over and over again, they're saying our priority is, our focus area is this, the purpose of this funding is to, maybe they're talking a lot about collaboration. Maybe they want to see 4 or 5 cities or across several counties in a certain area. Maybe it's coming together about broadband access in rural areas by collaboration across municipality lines or something like that. And if your municipality is not actively involved in something like that, yes, you could apply. But if you read into it, what they're really telling you is you need to have, we're really looking for this kind of collaborative focus. And that's just an example, but I wanted to sort of introduce that concept. And I have gotten a reputation among a couple of my clients. I've worked with one in particular for gosh, 3.5 years now, almost 4 years. And I call it my cold wind of doom, because they might have, and this is a nonprofit client, but they would have board members going, here's this thing, apply for this. This is great. We're nonprofits, we can go. And so I'm looking at it, and you would think as a person who, as part of how I earn my living is writing grants, I'd be all about writing grants. Heck yeah, we'll write that grant. But I'm all about not wasting money, so that the money goes to the communities in need to make the most change. A quick example was they were eligible, this client, right? Because they were a nonprofit in a human service area in this state that was not Georgia, it's a different state, where this company was located. And I was like, okay. But in this case, the RFP was so broad, and the company was a tractor sort of tractor equipment company, and any nonprofit could apply, but they were only giving 1 grant per state across 10 states. And it was a pretty hefty grant amount, particularly for a medium-sized nonprofit. But my point is, when I really dug down and looked at it, it's like, okay, 1 grant across an entire state, whether you are Texas or Rhode Island, 1 grant if you were in their service area from each state. And their big focus, selling tractors and other agricultural equipment, was the outdoors, maybe, because that's where they did that. So their language was all about outdoors, environmental, outside, education, recreation. And this was not an outdoor centered nonprofit. So I'm talking you through that to maybe give you tips on how to talk through with other people you may report to about, yeah, we can do this. I can spend this wasn't a long application, but maybe 10 hours about doing this and charge this client for that. But the competitiveness of this proposal is not right up there. Now, if this was like a community garden, or if they were giving to municipalities, if they had a separate, hey, if you're a local government and you're trying to get your trails together with your Parks and Recs department, that's different. But that's not even what they were saying. So that close but not quite, eligible but not competitive, these are important distinctions that, if you're not considering them carefully, can be a reason that your grant might be declined, just because it wasn't really, you weren't really exactly where they were looking for. That also comes with taking that look at the NOFA, also known as RFP or OFA, the instruction guide. A lot of times when people are forwarding me grants for their agency, they read just $4 million maximum award for public safety or community growth or economic development. And that's what catches their eye. And they're paying me to suss it out. So when you're sussing, when you're looking, when you're investigating, again, that scope of service that I just talked about on the previous slide is a great, let's really look at the language here. What is it that they're saying that they really want? And for state and federal grants, they're more straightforward, I would say, than most private funders and foundations about it. You also want to look at the grant award, as Amanda has touched on. If your project is $1 million project and there's a, I don't want to keep picking on Parks and Rec programs, so I won't. If it's $1 million plus to fix your stormwater situation, and you're looking at a pass-through grant with the state agency, and the max you can get is a $15,000 grant toward it, and it's going to take you the same amount of time, that may not be the right one to go to. If it's a $4 million maximum amount, and your stormwater project is going to be $4 million, and they're giving out across the entire country, I'm not saying don't do it if you meet all the other criteria. I'm saying be aware that competition has just jumped to a stratospheric level. Now, if they were giving out 40 or 25, then it's like, yeah, let's go. But if there's 2 across the entire country, whew. Now, I just worked with another consultant who did push through with a client a grant, and the client had never been worked with this federal agency, and they were only giving away 4 across the country, and they got one of them. And was wonderful. And this was a program in Alabama all about foster kids, and they need the money, and they got the money. That's just really unusual as a first time. I think it speaks to the program, and it speaks to the consultant who was leading that charge. I was just helping with editing. You also want to look at the grant history of longer standing programs, especially when they only give out a couple of grants. If you can look and see that they're giving to the same grantees year after year after year, that may not be the best fit. There might be room for you to come in. Just saying. And also making sure that you understand, another way you can understand their priorities, if it's not completely spelled out in that very long and exciting read of a document you're looking at, is to look at the points per section and sort of see how that is spacing out, sort of what they're emphasizing, the questions that they're asking in the application itself, and use that as a way to make that decision too. So really, it's a true interpretation, as the slide says, of getting in that document and sussing out and going, okay, what is the real deal here underneath just this shiny money award? It's like you're holding up like a little carrot, or you're holding up for a dog like a little treat, and everybody's all excited and jumping around. But it's like, let's take a look at what's behind that and make sure that it is the right way to go. Mm-hmm. And I think in a previous example, we were talking about, we have we have on our website a go, no go decision guide that you can just download and adapt however you want to sort of walk you through that. But I would just caution, you want the best fit. And I'm not saying never write the grants and say no to everything, but just know what you're getting into.
Yep.
So another reason why sort of that background funder thing, and I won't rant about this. That's why we have our podcast, so we can rant in peace. We're here to just share information with y'all today. But lack of transparency or programs that don't follow a typical process. I would love to tell you that every state agency and every federal agency is completely transparent about everything, and that it's all done by multitudes of grant reviewers that, and their feedback is taken and sorted, and that is how it all happens. And sometimes most of the time, it kind of happens that way, but sometimes it doesn't. There may be things going on around behind the scenes, and I certainly don't want to bring politics into this, but actually it can play a role. It can kind of depend on pressures to do funding in different areas. It can depend on the skillfulness of advocacy that may be happening behind the scenes. There's one federal agency, and again, I was working with other consultant in a different opportunity, and we were told, hey, they don't usually give grants for a first time organization coming in directly to the federal agency. So it wasn't pass-through funding to the state. And it was, they ended up securing that grant, but I was just sitting there going, thanks for the insider information, but what? You know, it was like that always a bridesmaid, never a bride feeling was usually something I only experienced with private foundations, where I have been told to my face, well, you know, we just usually don't give to new organizations on the first go around. We just want to get to know you. And I always thought to myself, can't we just go have some tea and coffee somewhere? Can't you just stop by and we'll give you a quick tour? Can't we get to know each other without spending hours and hours on a big old document with all sorts of attachments? You tell me. But
Kimberly,
yeah.
I was gonna say I learned that the hard way. National Endowment for the Arts. I don't know if they're still that way. This has been a long time ago, and what really was frustrating to me learning that after the fact, because I called, of course, to find out why we didn't get funded. That was their exact answer. We never fund first-time applicants. Here's what was so frustrating for me. I was applying, it was Alpharetta Sesquicentennial. That's a fun word to learn. And so we were going to have part of our Sesquicentennial celebration was going to be this an painting and an installation of a mural that documented our history over the past 150 years. And so that was going to be like the culmination of the end of the year thing. So there was no need to apply next year because guess what? Our Sesquicentennial was over. So it was like, if I'd known that, I would have applied a year earlier and then regurgitated it, right? So,
but if they'd given you the grant a year earlier and you're like, psych, I'm not going to use it till next year, then they would have taken the money back.
And I know, but it's one of those things. It's like there are some rules that you don't know till you know, and it's really annoying. Funders, hello.
And the agency, since Amanda said NEA, I would say the agency that we were told by a larger organization that, hey, they usually don't, we think you should go for it, but they usually don't give it. It was SAMHSA. And they ended up granting this nonprofit, this statewide nonprofit, and we were all thrilled, but it was just like, why do we have to play these games? And we can't answer that. We can just tell you, but sometimes that happens.
It does.
And so some red flags around this. And this can also happen with state and federal. It is more prevalent with corporate and private foundation funding, but not everyone who puts together a NOFO, RFP, or OFA for state and federal agencies is like an award-winning logician and superior writer. I'm just saying it
Well, I will say Georgia state agencies have certainly gotten better over the years, but because I remember some when early 2000s, I couldn't find grant information. It was almost like the super secret passcode you had to know to be able to find out even when the grant existed and then when it was due. So Georgia state agencies are better, but there's still some that, they have a website, you can't find grant information. It's like you've got to keep hounding until you find the right person that can give you.
And or you can also go to GMA with Claire and Becky and all the team. They are there fighting the good fight,
Yes, they are.
that information out. So some things to look out for again, even if you've decided the grant is a good fit, it's like, hey, here are some things that are red flags that we're back to that eligible versus competitive, and also Amanda's idea of the square peg round hole whole scenario here. If you're looking for or nonprofit agencies that may also be coming to you for your help with funding in your area, obviously limited information is just a real bear. I would say for state and federal, limited or unclear information is a bear. I worked on a grant from the TANF grant for the state of Tennessee, where they actually changed forms in the middle of the grant process. And I'm not telling war stories just to tell them. I'm just saying, don't assume everyone has it all together on the grant making side. That was fun, but it occasionally happens. If you're working with or helping someone or an agency look for private funding, and the private funder, when you're looking at their 990, which is like a tax report for agencies that don't pay taxes, and they're checking, we only give to pre-selected organizations, that is 100% what they mean. So let's don't even go there. Another thing that for which there are some of these sort of corporate popularity contest kind of grants for local government agencies. I'm thinking particularly for first responders, where it might be they're opening it to cities and counties, fire departments, police departments, what have you. And it turns into sort of a, hey, get everybody to like and subscribe to this and that on our social media platform, and you'll be eligible to win like best city fire department ever. And they're only giving out one grant all across the whole United States. I'm just, exercise caution on whether or not that would be the best fit. Particularly, and Amanda's putting an example about PetSmart. Yeah, I was drawing a little bit of a blank. I know there are at least 4 or 5 in recent years where they are, if you're a local government, you can participate. Often it can be more of a straight ahead grant process like Target did for years, where they would fund local schools. So it's not, I'm not suggesting it's a scam, but it may not be, it may be so hyper competitive that you may be best suited looking for other grant opportunities where you will have a better chance. I think I would just put that out there. If it's not clear on how decisions are made, and I think SAMHSA and NEA are great federal agency examples on that. Yes, they have a rubric. Yes, they have grant reviewers. Yes, they do record comments. But if there's something else behind the scenes, or they're just not going to give it to a new applicant, you can't control for that. This is not, did you upload the abstract or not? There are things out of your control that can keep your municipality from getting this funding. Also, Amanda touched on this way back. It might have been in our second or third GMA talk about, we were talking about the difference between grants that are open, right? Or grants that are grant funding that's more distributed either by formula or like, and I cannot say this acronym to save my life. Community, CDBG. Huh.
There you go.
Thank you. How many years is it taking? Or appropriations. I'm not saying those are wrong. I'm saying be aware that there could be some things coming into play around that also may affect the competitiveness of related grant cycles. So this may be like a low point where you're like, what's the point of writing grants? Y'all just put me in a sad state, and we don't mean to. We just want to give you some realistic things to think about and to help educate those around you. So when you're faced with all this, what can you do? Go with what you can control and do to the best of your abilities. Manage that time. This is how setting priorities, which we talked about in earlier GMA webinars with you, setting grant priorities, getting a grants calendar, either getting approval, formal approval if needed, or just sort of that stacking hands across your different cities departments about where are we going? What is most likely? Here, based on our research, we feel like these grants are going to come around, or we went on GMA and looked at their website under their Four Seasons grants calendar. Okay, we see these things coming up. Those are the kinds of things that are going to get you ahead of the game. So you're less likely to make technical mistakes that can just get you kicked out of the process. You can control whether or not the attachments are properly named. As Amanda said, it can get really complex. I think Patrick pointed out earlier that if a lot of agencies, you have to submit certain documents. This is my little hand gesture for that. Certain documents in grants.gov, and then you have to go directly to the Department of Justice or SAMHSA or NIH or wherever you're going, Department of Energy, and then also upload things into their portal as well. These are things that you can educate yourself on in advance and understand how it works. Also, if you're having to get 7 or 8 letters of support, best practices, you draft the letter, best practices, you know the people and work with the people for whom you're requesting those letters, and you get it together and you're sending the letters. I don't recommend trying to save time by writing each letter exactly the same, because as a grant reviewer, I'm like, well, y'all, I'm not really sure of the depth of this relationship. If all 5 of your letters are just the same letter on different letterhead with different signatures. You can control whether or not you're proofing for spelling and grammar and word use, whether you're doing it and then using Grammarly and someone else is reading it, all of those things. You can control how clear the writing is. You can control whether or not you avoid jargon as much as you can, depending on, what kind of grant proposal it is. Spelling out acronyms the first time and then referring to them by the acronym. Those are things that are under your purview. The other things we're telling you about how they may make their decisions, it isn't, but going with what you can get done and know that you're putting that best grant foot forward is going to go a long way. And you may end up with a proposal that you could then modify and tailor to maybe a similar agency. And the reason I'm saying that, I'm thinking about all the BIL funding. If you've already gathered data and information about how a grant would benefit, at least 40% of the grant benefits would go to disadvantaged communities in your municipality. If you already gathered that information and it's right, and you checked it, you can use that in other proposals as well for related things. So I would just say helping folks you work with understand the complexity. The risk is worth the reward if you're able to control some of those kinds of things that are within your purview. We're certainly not saying don't go for grants. We're just saying it's not just hey, you write good emails. This thing is due next week. Here, you do it. That's a competitive way to approach the grants. I think that's what I'm saying. And go ahead.
Well, I was just saying, and I use, nobody likes to have to tell everybody, hey, we didn't get this grant, but I always try to use those opportunities to educate. And so I typically, whether I won a grant or didn't get the grant, I was always emailing our mayor and council, because they'd know about it, right? My city manager, and then whatever department head I was working with or other people. And I always, number one, would say, hey, this was a team effort. Big shout out to all people who helped provide me information, because I want everybody to know I didn't do it alone, because I don't want them to think I do it alone, because I don't. And number two, if we got it, great, yay, we can all cheer. But if we didn't, it's a good chance to be able to say things like, hey, I learned through our denial letter that they had 2,000 applications and they only funded 3. So not a huge surprise that the success rate was so low. So not a huge shock that we didn't get it. So, okay. Or, hey, I'm going to get feedback. And once we do find out that the feedback was actually really good, like, hey, we were really close to being funded, so we probably will go for this one again. Or, hey, they don't fund first timers. We learned about that. So it's a good opportunity and a way to educate. your boss, your board, your coworkers, like, hey, nobody gets every grant they write, and here's a million reasons why, and the things that are in our control, we're going to work on and we're going to fix, and the things that aren't, we're just going to move on and find other funders, because there's so many funders out there for local governments.
So we're, in the interest of time, we're going to glide through these last couple of slides. If we get to the top of the hour, please know that along with the recordings, you will get the resource guide that has some links to different government agencies to help out, links to our podcast episodes that cover this. So Amanda and I have both been grant reviewers, and we just finished an interesting grant reviewing project with the County Department of Health. And again, it was just, you could see the need, but sometimes folks were just really missing the boat on meeting the requirements of the grant, and your hands are kind of tied if a funder is. So the good thing about using grant reviewers is there's something systematic. But the bad thing is it's systematic, and so it's hard to do exceptions, and it's hard to work around that if you see an agency that's fulfilling an incredible need but maybe doesn't understand how budgets work. So again, if you're looking, think about that grant reviewer who's just doing this as a side in addition to their other duties, and they're looking, go spend the most time on the things that are worth the most points. Your time is limited, go there. You don't have to create all the sections in order, right? When as we pointed out earlier, you may be hustling for your letters of support and getting your budget stuff done and getting those attachments and finding that map. Where's the map? Or whatever it is that you need to upload. You can do those things in the order that makes sense, the most efficient sense, but the final product, of course, does need to be in order, and that narrative answers every question in order of how it is posed. And it's the most important thing is making sure that there's coordination across all the sections. Even more important when it's being written by committee, different people are giving you different things. You want to make sure that costs in the budget match items you're describing in the program area, that your goals and objectives coordinate with how the program is being described, that your needs statement demonstrates need, and that all your attachments are up in order. These are just basics, but paying attention to those basics can really help you perhaps even overcome some of the more nebulous things that might be going on behind the scenes. We do have just a few minutes left to go through. We have several episodes that we pulled together that talk about some of the things that we're talking about. Particularly, there's one in season 4, earmarks quality data and difficult conversations. Could be something to listen to and share with someone to whom you report. And also educate up managing above your pay grade. As grant professionals, we do this all the time, so we're here to help you through that. And finally, when you're looking at the resource guide that's coordinating, again, as Claire stated at the top of the hour, you're going to go in and get the recording and their live links and the resource guide, primarily this time to different government agencies that have different kinds of grant writing tools and education to help you out. Some sample applications or sample set program sections as well. This is where you can find us at heydayservices.com. And I bet, she says, checking her phone, we're right at the top of the hour. So once again, we want to thank you. And have a wonderful holiday, and we'll be back
We'll be back December 14th. So yeah, in 2 weeks, and we're talking about sustainability. So we hope to see y'all then.
Bye.
Bye, all.